Okay, rock and roll is our favorite thing.
We like rock and roll.
Right? We like rock and roll. I like rock and roll. I like country. I like all sorts of music. I like classical quite a bit too. Jazz.
We like music with guitars. Is that fair to say?
But rock and roll.
But rock and roll
is the king of it all. And we were having this big discussion, trying to figure out what is going with rock and roll today. Because
nothing.
Not
true.
I mean, there's definitely a lot going on with it, but it's just rock and roll used to be the only genre. It was on the mainstream. Yeah. There was pop, there's R&B, there's hip hop, there's country, there's adult, easy contemporary, blah blah blah. But rock and roll is what drove all of us, and that was what you hear as number one on the radios, the charts.
Yeah.
And that's not really the same,
different anymore.
And rock and roll bands cannot almost break out in the same way they used to. Even we were looking at the top rock bands. Let's say the top most streamed bands of the past decade has been Imagine Dragons. And that is they've had more streams, and they're a great band.
Sure.
Great band. But you listen to the record and you're not really hearing real drums or real guitar or real bass. It's a lot of pads and different types of
synthesized things, samples.
When you see them live, they're playing their instruments and they have lots of sort of pads playing along with them. But it's not like rock and roll when you think of Led Zeppelin.
Right.
And when you think of, even when you get into the 90s, and Red Hot Chili Peppers and Weezer and Green Day, some of the bands that were still rock and roll, thoroughly rock and roll, even Muse, sort of in the late 90s forming, and Radiohead 90s rock and roll, but then they became, what are they?
Even all the pop punk stuff like Blink-182, all that kind of stuff. There's still dudes playing guitars and bass and drums.
So it started our conversation again further. It's what's the last great rock band that had... but here's the caveat we came up with. It had to form after 2000, because once the 90s has so many.
Well, everything we threw out, we were like, oh, these guys. Oh, nope, they're in '96. So there was a lot that we looked up that we thought they were 2000s bands.
And the caveat as well, it couldn't just be who sold the most,
right?
Or who how long did it last? Because look at Zeppelin lasted 13 years. Yeah. The Beatles 8?
Yep.
And it's So Link doesn't really the Rolling Stones 265 years at this point.
Still going strong.
Going strong. The next when they cryogenically freeze themselves and they're playing their tour 2068, which would be awesome. I'll be there. I'll be dead.
Hey,
I'll be dead. I can't afford the cryogenic freezing. You might be alive. Doubtful.
It's doubtful.
Not with all that pork you eat, but anyway.
Bacon's good.
No, but so we were going down lots of rabbit holes because you couldn't be Creed or Nickelback, even though those sold like behemoths. They were formed in the 90s.
Nope.
So the 2000s, it opens up, it was the Strokes maybe, but they didn't really sell that much, and they formed in 97. The Killers, I was thinking
we
about.
decided not super rock and roll.
I mean, because they're sort of an 80s theme, and I love the Killers.
Yeah, they're great.
But it's not, they're almost too, what was that word you said? It was not posh, but it was something else.
Pop.
Yeah, but it wasn't pop either.
Well, I did say something.
It doesn't matter.
Wonderful, but now we don't know because I just say things.
So we entered that world of sort of punk, rock, has to be real instruments.
Yep.
We came up. We've been battling this, and this was the other thing. We've been asking for weeks. Every person that was born from 1990 or 1990/94 to the early 2000s, what is the most important band of your generation? 90% of them
said this.
They said the same thing. I was like, whoa, really? And I like this band a lot, but I was super excited to hear this. But I was like, man, that's.
And I was like, who? But now I've done my research.
We've listened to them a lot for the past few days. My Chemical Romance.
Who knew?
I kind of knew.
You kind of knew.
I'm a big fan.
That's right.
But I've been a big fan for a long time. But it's.
I wasn't not a fan. I just, I missed that sort
That's the thing. There's so many people of your age, and if you're in the mid 30s, you kind of missed it.
Yeah.
If you weren't into that genre.
Right.
It's kind of like we were saying. My dad was he missed sort of the 60s and 70s because he was just in John Lee Hooker and Buddy Blue Bland and Otis Redding. He missed the Doors and Zeppelin and everything because he didn't that stuff. He's like, oh, I don't like that stuff. Yuck. I was like, what? I was like, okay, weird. Then he went straight to Conway Twitty. I was like, whoa, okay, what happened? Whatever.
Conway's awesome.
And Brooks and Dunn, which is and Garth Brooks. And I was like, he went from Otis Redding. But anyway, My Chemical Romance. We were talking, we were trying to figure out, okay, so this band is definitely iconic.
Yep.
If you see them walking in the street, you know it's them during their heyday time, and probably even today. they have a look. I've looked at the pictures of them now. Like Gerard Way still looks like Gerard Way. He just looks like 43-year-old version of Gerard Way.
I still remember, I think it was Guitar World or Guitar Player, the cover with them and the Black Parade thing. I remember that being a big deal. Teaching how to play.
Well, yeah, because I mean, which is like some of the stuff like it's not like the hardest guitar parts, but it's rock and roll guitar parts.
When we were listening, it was way more rocky than I thought in my mind that was supposed to sound.
That's the thing, and like the whole point of this video too is we're trying to find out more rock bands, and get you to, if you haven't been exposed to this band, MCR. We're going to talk about some other ones too, like Panic at the Disco was sort of part of that, but then they're sort of pop indie, and then Fall Out Boy. Huge monsters of the same genre, but at the same point we were like, well, all these other guys, but there's not the magic and mystery that these guys
got a bit of a cult.
It's not a bit of a cult. There's is now. It's a bunch. There's anywhere from 15-year-old kids I've met that weren't even alive when they were really around. They kind of were, but they're babies. To 40-something-year-old people like myself I'm not obsessed with it. I meet them and I've met some people that went to their reunion show when they had their first concert in LA, which I find this fascinating. It's the venue they had it at. When they announced the tickets, it sold out within minutes.
It's crazy.
And they made more money in this venue than in the history that venue's ever made. It was almost $1.5 million in this small venue for ticket sales. For a band,
that's great. That's
and
awesome.
They weren't the top-selling act of this whole genre, but they were formed based off of after September 11th in 2001, sort of in trying to help kids with teen suicide and cool. Mental issues. So it had sort of a mission in the same vein, like U2 has a mission, and certain bands sort of speak out for something. Yeah. But then the thing that happened is they really resonated and captured their audiences with the hyper-frantic music. It was very punk and rock, but very depressing lyrics.
A little depressing.
Which really kind of because some of their records are very depressing. Excellent. But we'll get into that in a minute. But it also, the psychological studies I read after researching, because I don't know why I was doing this.
We're getting very fancy here.
I was reading psychology studies. Because I was like, why? Because this didn't make sense to me. I was like, how is this band so popular to people with a cult? But it's this type of music, when you are depressed, actually helps you not be so depressed when you listen to it.
Good to know.
Well, because I think it creates this sense of community. There's so many other people besides me going through this, and it was in a time before the internet was so ever present. It was there, but it wasn't every minute of our lives we're checking TikTok and how many followers do I have on Instagram. Which also leads to teen suicide, that type of thing. But anyway, on more happy notes, so we get to their records, and their first blowout was their second record, which had 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge is the name of it, but had Helena, however you want to pronounce it, which was sort of a blow up MTV hit and a YouTube hit, and it was everyone's dressed in this sort of their military uniforms, kind of right. At this point, we're seeing cool outfits. Right. He's got his black hair down in front. Yep. They're wearing bulletproof vests, the red ties. It's very much at the same time as Interpol in New York, which is the indie scene. Same outfits, pretty much.
Oh yeah.
If you think about it, but these guys they're from New Jersey, just a bunch of friends that formed and had this massive hit with that. Then came the Black Parade.
Right.
And the Black Parade is an entire record about someone dying from cancer and joining the Black Parade, which is this mythical group that you join after you die, and it goes into some more spirituality things. But the music's just cool and rock and roll and fun.
I did not believe it when you said that it sounded sort of like Brian May, and it does. I was like, oh wow, that is Brian May. How weird is this? So if you like Brian May, you may just like MCR. I use the cool initials.
I hope when if MCR ever any of the guys from any of the guitar players from the band actually watch this video, I'm pretty impressed with the guitar work on it, rhythm and lead wise.
It is not at all what I mean, from seeing the outfits like you said and just sort of missing that when that was happening, that's just not what I imagined it was going to sound like.
No, because you would think the whole screamo thing was happening.
I thought more emo-y, screamo-y thing.
And all that junk, and then emo as well. This is not Dashboard Confessionals. This is a rock and roll band.
Pretty cool.
That got sort of pigeonholed by a lot of people that didn't listen to him as an emo band. And
guilty.
Well, I mean, me too, I think, at the time, because I was in a band in New York City at the same time that they exploded. I didn't explode. I'm more decompressed.
Maybe a little.
It was a little, oh, just kidding. But I remember sort of seeing them like in tandem with like what we were doing. I was like, oh, that's a whole different scene, and I don't really totally get it. Then I kind of got it later in life, like 10 years later. Like when I started working with some of my students that were so obsessed. Chase, out there, if you're listening to this by any weird chance, she was like sort of instrumental in me rediscovering what these guys were doing.
Very cool.
And how these teenagers, I mean, this young lady is like, I don't know, in her young 20s, and she was obsessed with this band. And I was just like, why is this young person that could have never seen them obsessed? Right. They broke up in 2013.
Wow.
You know, so, and they had this huge show that just like kind of like exploded, and then this tour was all set to go, and then COVID happens. But no, it's we were just fascinated trying to find other bands,
right?
Like what is there anybody else we're missing right now? That's like, you know, we're not talking metal,
no,
because that's
not yet.
A whole different genre that we're gonna have a thing on. Because I grew up as a diehard early Metallica fan too. But yeah, it's fascinating. You know,
it is fascinating.
And what do you think?
This is a whole new world.
I know, because
so
like, that's
I'm like, oh wow.
Because you're. I feel like you're like more like the audience here. That
I am like
I'm talking to you
right there. I am the
there.
target audience here, being sold.
Well, I don't want to sell it to you, but it was fun. We listened to MCR all day too.
Well, because it was on a few times when I walked into the guitar shop, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. What is this? This is My Chemical Romance.
And you're like, oh, I thought they would just be whiny, kind of like that's sort of like and it's the opposite of that. It's like one of the other thing we're talking about is like what makes it a great rock band is that it has a great frontman.
Yep.
And like there's so many great bands out there that just sort of miss that one element.
Right.
Because you go back to, you know, the Freddie Mercurys and like the Bonos and like, I mean, don't get me wrong, he's not there, but even like Liam Gallagher from Oasis, there's a magic and majesty.
There is something rock and roll about this personality that's out front that is sort of larger than life.
And if it doesn't have that, the band is not complete.
Right.
There's a lot of great bands like that we've talked about. I probably would know these guys if they were walking in
if you just saw them
into Walmart, which they never would probably. But you might see Gerard Way there because he's like, you know, if you like the Umbrella Academy, he wrote that like on Netflix.
I just put that together.
Isn't that nuts? Yeah, he's a great, like, you know, he
wow.
After like My Chemical Romance ended, like he was like, you know, I'm not going to stop living, and he's still
smart.
I think he's still married to the same person too, and has like a daughter with her and everything.
It's kind of cool
from that day, like from this type of punk rock hard, like where that's not what you sort of think of. It's like I'm going to have a family,
man,
and stay with it. Whereas like some of these more the goody two shoe bands, like there's been disillusioned in marriages. I'm not going to say names because I think it's sad when we talk about that. I like happy stuff.
We like positive things.
And like that's the idea is like, you know, if you haven't given this band a chance before, like because we're always looking for new rock and roll, and we're so excited about the idea of new rock and roll bands emerging. Like because this one kind of came, and we weren't like, you know, in 2000 early 2000 areas when it came out, it wasn't one that was expected.
Right.
You know, because it's a different platform of music then, and then now we don't know what's next. We're waiting.
And I mean, obviously there are lots of rock and roll bands out there doing cool things. You're talking about hitting the mainstream
and becoming like cult-like.
Yes.
You know, because still Panic at the Disco is like huge and bigger than ever right now. With Brendan Urie, what he's doing with that last record, phenomenal record. If you haven't heard that, unbelievable. It's like I think it's the best Panic at the Disco record. Almost, it's maybe number 2. Maybe number 1. But that's my opinion. But I'm an old man. But no, it's So we love new bands, and we're trying to get the dialogue started. Like, hey, let's find rock bands out. Like that band from England, Shapes.
Yeah.
Spelled with a V. It's really confusing. The A is a V. But we saw them at the Epicenter Festival, and they were unbelievable. But they haven't blown up because we don't know if rock bands can the same way unless we support them, like head over fist and it's pop is sort of taken over.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing, except for that it is a bad thing.
Except for it kind of is.
Don't let your kids listen to pop only. You have to listen to a little rock and roll.
Expand them.
No, it is. Like the fact that my 7-year-old son knows all the words to Black Parade makes me very proud. It's
kind of
really
awesome.
funny. Yeah. And I'm not okay. Even the part where he says the cuss word, you know, I have to sort of mumble over that a little bit. He's not a blank and K.
We do that in the car a lot.
But I don't believe in censorship. It's one of my things, and if the song says it, you can say it, you know, and if it's a good song, unless it's like WAP or something, we're not going to ever hear that. Yeah. Wine and Pizza, again, if you're confused by that. You know, but help us, like, start, like, if the dialogue starts out there, like, talk about the new bands that are out there that are exploding, like, and help us sort of figure out a way to get those guys popping up and blowing up more, because we want to hear more rock.
Yes,
and, like,
it would be nice.
And Sean, our young guy that works here, who will eventually be on the channel once, you know, we can, like, pull him out of doing too much work. He always brings us new rock and roll music, but he's also obsessed with stuff from the 90s, so we need
It's true.
We need more help. Help us.
He's on his Chili Peppers kick right now.
Oh, God, too much Chili Peppers.
He's just discovered the...
That's so mean.
No, I mean, it's kind of true.
I think he has like an Anthony Kiedis tattoo, like on his, like, his left breast.
Know.
It's really cute.
It's good. It's cute.
No, but if any of you are like diehard MCR fans out there, like, and you have crazy tattoos or something, like, please share your stories of seeing them live, or if any of you were at the show, the one in LA, or like any of like the Black Parade tour. We'd like to hear those stories just tossed around. And we read every comment, and we don't get to respond to everyone sometimes, especially like the really mean ones that hurt our feelings. But no, like, let us know and help us with more bands. Like what are your favorite rock bands that formed after 2000?
After 2000.
Have to have formed after. It doesn't matter if it was 1999. It's got to be after 2000, and have to become huge and cult-like, and then maybe imploded, maybe not. But maybe they're still going. There's plenty of them out there. We just want to start the conversation with MCR. So everyone, put on your patch. Go join the Black Parade. Thanks for watching.
Click like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Make sure to hit the bell so you don't miss videos in the future. We appreciate you hanging out with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.